See this big fork? That's important on a buck.
And that's important on a buck because?
Because it shows the mass and the basic measurements of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all done, the measuring on the point spread of it here, by its base and its thickness and the distance of the fork, the depth of the fork.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to take a picture from this side where it has a small fork. You want to get that big fork up there to get them.
And there's quite a collection of arrowheads here. Holy, don't tell me you got these on this property.
Oh yeah, that was one of the highlights of my life when I was younger, was to go down and look for arrowheads. And so many stories associated with that one. I can remember these little ones were found, and it almost looks like those were the ones that the young guys practiced on. You can see how those are not shaping at all, and those are the ones I'd find right up here on top. And then Dad told me about the field down here on the bottom that really had some well-shaped arrowheads. And I went down there and all of a sudden stumbled onto this guy right here. Okay, that was the one that I put in my pocket so I wouldn't break it. Yeah, no, I mean it was the first one I ever found down there in the field that was perfect, and I was so proud of that thing. I ran home because I didn't want to break it, and
It is perfect.
yeah, well, I mean not perfect, but
Looks perfect to me.
yeah. Here, for instance, is referred to as a Pertinalis point.
Now, which one? Is it
Yep.
this one up here?
Right, that one right there. Right, it's just a certain shape that was.
A typical.
Well, the Lapon Apaches were the ones that lived in this area, and they had a great big encampment down here.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have a spring named Lapon Spring, and that is on our property here. So we're very fortunate.
That's cool. Tell me what else we got over here.
This was just the actual. Well, that was the dog I was referring to. That is Edgar. Edgar he took life serious. He would take no flack from nobody, and he was not your generous kind. Even the boys were amazed at how protective he was when we'd have a deer on back of the pickup that we shot, and they'd want to go up there and look at it, and Edgar would establish that as mine. And the cat, it's Tiger. He is,
They really got along like that?
yeah, they got along real well.
And who's hunting up here?
That is again me when I shot that particular buck. It was in West Texas, and that was the country that we hunted. If you go down a little bit, this hill that I'm on is this hill back here on top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't know if you can see it, but that thing is on a mule. We had to take a mule to actually drag that thing down. My cousin and I drug it down to this plateau right there, but to get it all the way through the canyon, we had to load it on that mule, which was a really cool experience too. And that's a good friend of mine, David Stone. The bottom here was 3 bucks that we killed that same group that time. Again, that's my cousin Kerry and a good friend of ours, Allie Herbert. Again, a relative of Joni. We would drive up, way up. It's a huge pasture, just unbelievable, the ranches in West Texas. And we would start early in the morning, and we'd pack our lunch and all the water and stuff that we needed for the whole day. And you could head out and take your time and knew that all you had to do was go back to camp before the whole day was finished. And that was amazing. Just sitting there, taking your time, enjoying life, and then saying, oh boy, I get to eat lunch now. And then you'd hear a shot, and man, one of my buddies got something. And always you were supposed to be so still and sit and watch, and yet as soon as you'd hear a shot, you felt like, I gotta get up and get going. Well, I gotta go shoot me one too, And if I'd have probably sat there longer, but the whole day we would spend out there hunting and working our way back to camp and trying to get there before it got dark was a good plan. That was just a wonderful life.
And you had to be patient, right?
Well, again, it was something that you kept on walking. I mean, literally, those hills, it was amazing how far away from camp we were, and we had to walk to get back to camp, basically up and down the hills. There were a lot of times it was always a deal of, am I going to go around this hill, or am I going to go through the draw? And it always looked so easy to go through the draw and up the hill. But when you got down there in the bottom of that draw, that was a big cedar-covered canyon down there in the bottom that was really hard to get through. So, and then going up again, we finally learned, just follow the deer trail. The deer know how to get there, and just follow that trail and don't get off it. So that's what we did. Again, this is going to sound like I'm bragging, but again, there's so many things I'm proud of in life. But my whole goal in life was to shoot a 20-inch buck. That was the standard of when we were growing up. If it had 8 points, that was a magnificent buck. But then as I got a little older, the bucks kept getting bigger, and we hunted them all over the place. But I always wanted to shoot a 20-inch wide deer. And one day, one of our neighbors said, I drove by your pasture.
No.
And saw he was over 20, I guarantee you. And I said, yeah, I said, right. And he said, no, I'm serious, this is a train wreck. So I actually got Joni up the next morning, and she took me out there, drove me along the road so I could sneak off the highway and to our pasture. Okay? And sat down and didn't see a dang thing all morning, and started walking home, and all of a sudden I saw this buck, and it was a big one, you know, and then it was gone, and there were some other animals beside it, and there was everything froze because basically I assumed they had seen me, and the buck, I never saw him again. He stood there forever, and I waited a long time. And again, this is getting pretty weird, but what occurred was that all of a sudden I saw a spike, and it was like he was letting the scouts in front of him go, and just to see if the coast was clear. A spike walked across, a doe walked across, and still he was quiet. And again, this is going to get a little crazy, but then all of a sudden this guy walked out, okay? And holy mackerel, that was the buck of my dreams right there, okay? So I'm sitting there, and earlier in my life, Joni was along when I missed a big buck, and Dad was with me, okay? He was driving, I shot at it and missed, and he said, I've seen you shoot sparrows with a 22 at a further distance. It turns out I couldn't really see anything but the neck, but Joni could see the whole body, and I was leaning out to pick up and shot it and missed it. Oh, it was terrible. My cousin wound up winning the local deer contest because he shot a buck over at their place. So anyways, I saw this thing, and again, I'm not associated with miracles or anything else like that in life. You know, that has never occurred to me, but I promise you this in that regard. As I was sitting there, this buck came out, and I started breathing rather heavily, yes, so to speak. And I was thinking, okay, just calm down now. And I put my gun up, flipped her off safe, and pulled on that buck and felt myself jerk. Okay? And the gun did not go off. Now, I'm not saying Dad was up there telling me, you know, you're an idiot, but I promise you, there was nothing mechanically wrong with the gun at that point. When I pulled the trigger and nothing happened, and I had jerked. And all I did was bring it back again. Did not touch anything on the gun.
No.
I promise you. And I swear that's the truth. That was like a miracle. And whether Dad had anything to do with it or not, I don't know. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And so this next time, it was okay now, idiot, just hold it steady. And I can remember squeezing and being steady. And that thing took off like a rocket. And but you could see he was.
He'd been hit.
I walked up there and found it, and it turned out to be 26 inches wide. And 20 was what we were shooting for in life. So 26 inches. I told one of the teachers at the school, and she went home and told her husband, and she came back and said, how many inches did you say it was? And I told him that was right, but he didn't believe it. He said, no, maybe 20, but not 26. So she was so happy that she did have the number right.
That's a heck of a number.
Moments. That, again, some of the great hunts I've been with. Over there.
Oh, look at that. Good heavens.
Oh, gosh, that was one of so many neat things in my life. I knew a gentleman that was a science teacher that I really adored when I was teaching, and he came from Alaska. He was a wilderness guy.
Wow.
He
what a
did
life,
river
huh?
rafting and everything. And he just happened to be at our school for a couple of years. And I got to know him real well, and I said, is there any way I could take my son up there with me, and he and I go up and enjoy Alaska with you? And he said, I'd love to take you guys up there. So he drove up, and we flew all the way to Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And so Garrett and I wound up sleeping in a tent for a couple of weeks. He drove up in a pickup, and we had a tent in the back. He had a cab shell over the back, and we got up there and got to spend nights in a tent. And he was nice enough to not say anything. We came upon this one little waterfall and thought, oh, we got to take a picture of that. And then we saw an eagle, and it was 100 yards off, and we took a picture of that, and he just let us go. And then later on, he started laughing because there are waterfalls 15 times better than that one, and he just wanted us to enjoy it from that moment on. And eagles were like buzzards up there. They were right by you. And yet he let us stay excited about every part of it without us telling him.
That was nice.
And again, the salmon fishing was just so amazing. This is a Japanese gentleman that we were fishing off a bridge,
Look
the
at
Skeena
it.
River.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on the other side of the bridge and fishing with a handmade lure. And I was over here casting like nobody's business, and he caught a couple. And so I went over there and asked him, what are you using? And he said, oh, I make these special flies myself. Okay?
Whoa.
So is there any way I could buy one from you? I said, here's one. So went back over there and started casting. It was just a pink, weird little fly. I wish I still had it. I don't know. I think the silverfish got it. But anyways, I flipped that thing out there and tried it a few times, and I hooked it. This salmon.
That's a monster.
Yep. And it was a very rinky-dink spinning reel that I had. And I said, hey, I got a good one. And he said, you have a net? I said, no, I don't
No
have
net.
I'm having a ball over here. And he said, tell you what, I'll bring you a net, but we don't need to hurry because it's going to take you a long time. And it really did. It was a great fight. I mean, that sucker just kept taking line out. And pretty soon he came moseying over there, this Japanese guy, and had a net. And that son of a gun finally came in close enough to where we could land it.
Who's in the middle?
This would be me, and that's Garrett in his younger days. Okay.
Oh, I'd recognize him anyway.
Oh yeah, apparently.
And look at that background; those beautiful
yeah,
mountains.
that was such a pretty. And that was when we went out on a boat. We hired a guide and went out, and those are some silver salmon. They're called real unique. They don't get particularly large, but
They're beautiful.
oh, it was a great trip. Again, I kept a journal of it the entire time because just so neat with all the things we got to experience. At one point, we were over there, and all we do is take a side road and go off to the side of the main road, just a little ranch road, and camp out there in the wilderness. Okay, I mean, just straight, flat, set up camp. And it was huge trees around us. I was always impressed with Alaska at how the trees were growing right beside the road, you know. And we came in, and that night, all of a sudden, the next morning, you could hear helicopters coming in. And it was a crew that was going to chop down the trees. So they cranked her up, started clear cutting that thing, and it was amazing how many of those huge trees they had cut before we left. And what turns out they had done was, later on from helicopters, you could see that they'd left the trees right by the road, the total scenic view, they'd left them, but right after you got over the hill, that's where all the logging started. That's where they were clear cutting it.
Yeah.
And so that was some virgin country that would never be the same after we camped there that night.
Or at least generations down the road it would take to replace that.
Oh, yeah, just amazing on that.
I like this saying up here.
Yep. Again, my grandfather was in the cattle business. The big silver plate in the back, that was for the best breeder of cattle in the San Antonio Stock Show. What they do is they take 3 animals that were raised by the same breeder and get them as a group of 3 calves, and they would show against each other, against other big breeders. And he won that several times in San Antonio, and he was so proud of it. And they gave him these huge silver trays for that, so that was a big deal. That was this bull right here, or actually a steer. That was the grand champion Hereford steer of the show in town. And then we had a bull that was reserve champion in San Antonio. So that was a big deal for me. That night, after he'd been picked, they had a parade of champions. Okay? So what they did then, that in the rodeo, they'd take out all the animals that had won first place, and I was a little guy, you know, and nervous as heck, and all of a sudden they had a parade of champions of all the big animals that had won, did well, all the champion Herefords and steers and heifers and all the different breeds and everything. And so I got to do that night, and they turned off all the lights. And I can remember so well, our bull was named Skeeter, and he and I had walked a zillion times up and down this trail because that's what you did. You taught the animal to behave well. And I can remember holding on to him thinking, well, I'm glad you're as tame as you are. But what happened was that when the lights were out, they spotlighted each animal as he was walking.
Yeah.
And said, this is the #1 Hereford of the entire steer class in the heavyweight division. This is the #1 Charolais bull. This is the Hereford bull. So, and then that spotlight would keep shining on each individual as you were walking. And I can remember that bull looking at that spotlight as it was coming toward us, you know. And I was thinking, if he takes off with me, I'm gone, because I'm not old enough to hold this thing. But it was almost like, well, that didn't hurt too much. And then the light went on us, and then we walked on through. But that was pretty exciting, too.
Sounds great.
So many little things. I got to be in a calf scramble because I was a member of the vocational agricultural program here in town. And Dad asked me one day, what is with the calves down here? You know, we'd show calves, and we'd have calves here, that would nurse on Jersey cows. Jersey cows basically had a lot more milk than a Hereford cow, so you would turn your Hereford calves, which you're going to show, onto these Jersey cows, which really loaded them up with milk. Okay?
Okay.
So we'd also have the Jerseys having little calves, and they weren't worth a flip for anything, the Jersey calf. But that's what I practiced my calf scramble with.
Wow.
So, I had these poor guys in the pen, and I practiced diving on them and putting a halter on them. And, well, that was the main thing of getting the halter on it, because you had to catch the animal out in the pen, out in that big arena, and then you had to get him across the finish line. So that was the deal. I was practicing, and Dad said, "What is the matter with our animals? You know, they are going nuts." Every time I walked in there, they were flying out of the pen, and it was me. I had been practicing with them, but that night. Again, a friend of mine from Marsh Ranch and I were both in that thing together, and I was lucky enough to get I caught an animal, dove and caught him, and got the halter on him, and drug him across the finish line first. So we won number one, which really gave you a big prize money, in which you could buy the next calf. So that was a highlight moment of my life too on that thing, getting the first calf across.